In every town, there exists a shadowy corner, a place that locals avoid and where whispers of dark history linger. In the town Sam had moved to, this shadow hung over a street. Street number 13. Unlike other streets, this one was bordered by a dense wall of knotted trees and marked by houses so dilapidated they seemed to be held up by sheer stubbornness. Though narrow, the road was steeped in silence, interrupted only by the rare sound of wind rustling through brittle leaves or the occasional distant owl call. By day, it looked abandoned, a forgotten part of town's past, but by night, the street seemed to throb with a life of its own, as if awakening from a slumber to wander down its path. Sam was new here, blissfully unaware of the stories whispered about this place. The townsfolk had their reasons to avoid the street. Stories of people who disappeared or returned haunted, murmurs of shadowy figures seen through cracked windows, and ghostly laughter at midnight had created a veil of terror around street number 13. But Sam was the curious sort. Having recently moved from the city, he was used to stories, myths, and tall tales, none of which could scare him. He prided himself on being unshakable, someone who faced fears with a camera in hand. And perhaps it was this very pride that led him to street number 13 one autumn evening. That night would set him on a path so terrifying that even his deepest fears could not have prepared him for what he was about to discover. Sam had grown up photographing urban landscapes, but over the years, his interests had shifted toward abandoned buildings and eerie sites, places where the past seemed to linger in dark corners. The thrill of finding stories in places no one dared enter filled him with purpose. So when he heard tales of street number 13 at the local cafe, his curiosity bloomed into fascination. The bartender, a grizzled man with wary eyes, offered an ominous warning when Sam asked about it. "Don't go there, son. Street number 13 isn't like the other streets. It swallows the brave and leaves them in its shadows." Sam chuckled to himself, assuming it to be the dramatic language of a small town with a knack for storytelling. The more he heard, the more his intrigue grew, convincing him that he needed to be the one to debunk these eerie tales and capture the truth. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Sam packed his essentials: a camera, a flashlight, and a notebook for recording any details worth remembering. Street number 13 wasn't far, and he knew it would look better at twilight when shadows softened the edges of things. He walked briskly, his heart beating faster with each step that brought him closer to the legendary street. When he finally reached it, a chill swept over him, different from the cool evening air. The street was eerily still, draped in the last light of dusk, with houses stretching down its length like the twisted spines of creatures lying in wait. He took a few steps forward, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Once he crossed onto street number 13, Sam felt as though he had passed into another world, one wrapped in darkness and silence. The houses seemed alive with age, their walls etched with years of decay and abandonment. As he raised his camera, he could feel an inexplicable sense of being watched, as though unseen eyes were tracking his every move. He forced himself to ignore the prickling sensation and began capturing photos, letting the lens reveal details he might otherwise miss. When he reviewed his photos, though, something peculiar stood out. The images showed odd figures at the edges, vague shapes that looked like people staring out from broken windows or standing just within shadows. He brushed it off, convinced it was just his mind playing tricks. But as he moved further down the street, something caught his eye. In one of the houses, a faint light flickered, casting eerie shadows against the walls. Sam felt a mix of curiosity and dread, but the pull was too strong to ignore. He moved closer and peered inside through a cracked window. His eyes widened in shock. A family sat around a dusty table as though frozen in mid-meal, their expressions locked in fear and anguish. The room was untouched by time, preserved like a terrible memory. He stepped back, heart pounding, as he tried to rationalize what he had seen. Yet, as he looked down the street, the other houses too began to light up, one by one, each window revealing figures with hollow eyes, staring out at him. Over the next few days, Sam became obsessed. He couldn't shake the images of those vacant eyes staring back at him, their expressions etched with lifeless terror. He began digging into the town's records, visiting the library and scouring through old newspapers, hoping to find any trace of what might have happened on that street. He learned that street number 13 was once lively, filled with families and children's laughter. But one stormy night, decades ago, something inexplicable occurred. All the residents vanished without a trace, leaving behind uneaten meals, lights left on, and lives frozen in place. One evening, after learning about an elderly woman named Evelyn who had witnessed the street's descent into mystery, Sam paid her a visit. Her house was dimly lit, filled with the scent of old books and memories. She spoke in a quiet, trembling voice, her gaze distant, as if reliving the horrors of a past best left buried. Evelyn described how, as a child, she would hear whispers drifting from street number 13, soft tinklings and gentle hummings in the halls. The townsfolk tried to ignore it at first, dismissing it as the wind or the play of shadows. But as the years passed, people started to disappear. Evelyn's own brother was among the missing, taken by the street's insidious pull. Her words chilled Sam as she described the way her brother would stare blankly down the street, as if something invisible called to him. The last time she saw him, he was walking toward street number 13, his face blank and unseeing. She warned Sam, "Whatever you seek on that street, it's not what you think. You'll find only despair." Despite Evelyn's warnings, Sam couldn't resist returning. This time he was more prepared, or so he thought, armed with a stronger flashlight, extra batteries, and a steely resolve. He arrived at dusk, feeling the oppressive atmosphere press upon him as he entered the street's boundary. The air grew colder, and the silence more intense. Shadows danced along the street, curling like smoke around the edges of houses, moving unnaturally as though they had a life of their own. Each step echoed in the silence, amplifying his heartbeat, a steady drumbeat of tension. As he approached the far end of the street, he felt something pulling him, a voice that wasn't quite a sound but more of a feeling. He tried to focus his mind, but images of faces from the street flooded his vision. Faces frozen in fear, eyes hollow, their expressions pleading, yet resigned. Suddenly his flashlight flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. A cold sweat broke over him as the street stretched endlessly before him, each house seeming to close in, suffocating him in its inescapable grip. In the faint moonlight, he saw figures beginning to emerge from the shadows, shapes of the vanished residents, their faces twisted in silent screams, hands reaching toward him. He turned to run, but found the street was now an endless corridor of houses, each one harboring a silent witness, every window filled with a shadowy figure. The silence was pierced by a soft whisper, calling his name. It was Evelyn's voice, pleading with him to turn back. But there was no way out. He was trapped, a prisoner of street number 13, forever bound to its dark history. Just like the faces that now haunted every window, their hollow eyes a reflection of his own fate. Dawn arrived, casting light over the town, but street number 13 remained cloaked in darkness, as if defying the sun's warmth. Sam was never seen again, but the locals spoke in hushed voices of a man with a camera, now wandering the street, his hollow gaze forever searching, the newest soul claimed by the street's insatiable hunger. Some say that if you walk past street number 13 in the dead of night, you can hear footsteps, whispers, and the faint click of a camera capturing shadows that only he can see. The street remains silent, holding its secrets tightly, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to enter its shadows. Thank you for joining us on this bone-chilling journey down the haunted path of street number 13. If this story sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a tale of terror. Your support helps us continue to share these eerie adventures with you. Now, here's a question only for the brave. If you found yourself walking alone down street number 13 on a foggy night and heard footsteps behind you, what would you do? Would you turn around or keep walking? Let us know in the comments below, and may your answer bring you courage.